In previous videos, I've outlined my proposal for pub immigration juries as a way of taking immigration decisions out of the hands of officials, lawyers, and judges and into the hands of ordinary local people who have lived here for at least the last 20 years. Almost all elements of this system will likely be struck down by courts, which, if a government ignored, would take us into a constitutional crisis. And I'm suggesting that we need to seek a democratic mandate for such a crisis, keep calm, and carry on, accepting significant political and economic damage in the short term. At the same time, we should try to maintain positive relations with all stakeholders while they see us implement a seismic shift in democratic and constitutional practice. Let's turn to asylum. What could be the issues with using pub immigration juries for asylum applications? These juries will necessarily be semi-formal, rough and ready, with no absolute criteria. It will be up to the members of the jury what questions they will ask the applicant online and the sponsors in person, and how they evaluate the answers. The main criteria I'm proposing are: would the applicant be a good neighbour and a good fit for that part of the nation? This system is absolutely incompatible with our treaty obligations under the 1951 United Nations Refugee Convention. The main goal of that convention is to ensure that people are not returned to countries where they will be persecuted again. It will be open to the members of a pub immigration jury to account for that issue, if they choose and in their way, or not. This obstacle seems impossible to overcome, so where do we go from here? Let's take a step back for the moment and compare the number of refugees worldwide in 1950 with now. In 1950, there were 2 to 3 million refugees, about 1 in 1,000 people on Earth. Now there are 35 to 40 million, around 5 in 1,000. And if we add in all forcibly displaced people, there are more than 100 million, which means about 15 in every 1,000. In the UK, applications for asylum after 1951 were initially no more than a few hundred per year, as most people accessed resettlement schemes following World War II, or schemes for crises in specific nations. Most of these schemes had wound down by the 1980s, yet even in 1985, there were only 5,000 applications for asylum to a nation of 56 million. This figure suddenly shot up to 44,000 in 1990 when the Iron Curtain fell in Europe. Figures steadily rose since then to 82,000 last year, with the UK population of 68 million. So if we factor in population rises, there are now 10 times as many asylum applications as in 1985. And if we go back to 1990, there are 50% more applications per year, but crucially, only about 2% are now from Europe, mostly Albania, and most of the rest are from the Middle East and Africa. So we need to be honest and say that applying for asylum now is a mainline route into the UK for non-Europeans whose cultures are usually radically different from ours. As such, the societal and world situation is now radically different from the time of the UN Refugee Convention in 1951. And even if we withdrew from that convention, we would still have other legal obligations to process asylum applications under the European Convention of Human Rights and customary international law. So there seem to be three main options. First, withdraw into our national bunker and ignore our international obligations. Second, give up trying to reform and democratize our immigration system because it can't be compatible with international law, never mind UK law. Three, reform and democratize our immigration system our way in defiance of international law, but then build momentum for international change. As you can imagine, I propose option three. How would that work in practice? Who knows? But here are a few pointers. First of all, no nation likes being bounced into action by the unilateral policy moves of another nation, even an ally, and even where there is understanding of the reasons for radical changes. After all, many European nations are experiencing similar problems to ours in the area of immigration. To counteract this, we would need to build more goodwill with other nations. How? For a start, we can do more to send our ministers to other nations, especially in Europe, to talk with leaders and even address legislators and the people of those nations direct in their native languages. This could provide some reassurance that we respect their interests, their cultures, and will work with them as equals. We could also lead or intensify diplomatic efforts to get more people safe, people in countries where immigration applications come from. This will help all nations, especially in Europe. Immigration authorities know a lot about circumstances on the ground from applications, as well as from aid agencies, diplomats, and allied nations. Pub immigration juries will be learning a lot too and can feed back to ministers. It will be very interesting to see how members of those juries respond to what they learn about the facts on the ground in unsafe countries. UK diplomatic prestige and professionalism can make a difference in trying to coordinate pressure and efforts to change circumstances on the ground in unsafe countries, for example, mediating conflicts, highlighting peoples at risk. We could ask the royal family and armed forces to assist. The result of increased attention by the UK on unsafe hotspots and a willingness to get down and dirty could be an increase in goodwill from other nations to sweeten the pill of our sudden disregard for international law. This could also help in negotiations to reform the UN Refugee Convention. The UK has some negotiating cards internationally which it could play. For example, we have a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. We could give that up. After all, we recognise that we don't have the same status we had after the Second World War. We've also seen the huge limitations of the UN. How many voters are really going to care if we give up that place in return for something real? We're a nuclear power. We could emulate France by sharing nuclear capability with other countries or even disarming. Which one of us would press the nuclear button and kill hundreds of thousands of people? This would also save us money, hopefully. Personally, I think there will be a huge increase in soft power for the UK from implementing radical internal immigration reform and then spearheading diplomatic efforts to get more vulnerable people in the world safe. This would far outweigh technical losses of power in the UN. And at the end of the day, we live in one world and we're all human beings. We all need each other. Immigration policy will always have an international dimension, whether we like it or not. And we need politicians who are willing to engage constructively on the international level.